Welcome to Ag Diesel Solutions garage. Today we're going to be working on a 2010 Dodge pickup truck. It has a 6.7 liter Cummins engine. Today we're going to be installing a part number 20200, and that's for a 2007.5 to 2012 6.7 liter Dodge Cummins engine. Okay, our first step here on installing our performance module is going to be to locate the map sensor, which is on the driver's side of the engine. As you can see right here where I'm pointing with my screwdriver, this is going to be our first step. We're going to unplug this here and plug in our harness, and we'll show you in the next step how it all looks. Okay, the first step to installing our performance module is going to be to locate the map sensor on the 6.7 liter Cummins engine. It's located on the driver's side. We're going to unplug the sensor located right here. Okay, I've got the map sensor unplugged. I've plugged our harness into the map sensor. I'm going to take the factory map sensor plug it into our harness. Make sure when you plug this in that it snaps. Okay, now that we have the map sensor all hooked up, the next step is going to be to locate the fuel pressure sensor, which is located on the driver's side at the end of the common rail. As you see here, we're going to unplug the fuel pressure sensor. We'll plug it into our harness and plug our harness into the sensor. Okay, now we have the fuel pressure sensor plug attached. What we did is we disconnected the factory harness. We plugged the factory harness into our harness. We plugged the plug on our harness into the fuel pressure sensor. Everything is snapped into place and it's secure. So the next step is going to be to secure our performance module. Somewhere here in the engine compartment, we'll use some of the zip ties that are supplied with the kit. I just want to make sure that we keep the module and the harness away from any excessive heat or any moving parts. Okay, now we have our performance module is mounted up here to a harness. It's away from any heat and excessive heat or moving parts. We plugged in our switch. The switch has 4 settings. All the way counterclockwise is stock, and then you have the low setting, which is 30. Medium setting is 60%, and the high setting is 90%. Just a little note, if you do not plug the switch in, this is optional. If you do not plug this in, the module will automatically default to the 90% setting, which is going to be where you're going to get your best horsepower and your best fuel economy. So we're going to put this switch in here and we're just going to mount it and zip tie it out of the way. Okay, now we have our performance module is all hooked up, zip tied out of the way. The next step on the 6.7 liter Cummins engine is we have to put in a shim kit in the fuel pressure relief valve. So we're going to go through that next. The first couple steps here, we're going to have to remove the dipstick. We're going to have to take off this protective cover. These are 8mm bolts, and we'll get that out of the way and we'll get to the next step. Okay, now that we have the protective cover off and the dipstick removed, the next step is going to be to remove these 2 clamps. There's one on the driver's side, one on the passenger side. They're 11mm, and this is the EGR tube. We don't need to remove the tube, but we're going to loosen the clamps up enough to rotate the tube towards the radiator. Okay, now that we have our EGR tube disconnected and slid forward and out of the way, we need to loosen up the air horn. To do that, there's 10mm bolts. I think there's 6 of them here. We just need to loosen those, take them out, and slide the air horn towards the front of the engine to get to our fuel pressure relief valve. Okay, now we have our air horn. The bolts are out of the air horn. We've removed it and we've just slid it forward. Our next step is, this is the fuel pressure relief valve. It's at the end of the common rail here. We're going to use an 18mm wrench and we're going to back it out and we'll install the shim kit. Okay, now we have the fuel pressure relief valve out of the vehicle. We have the shim kit here. We're going to take this nut that's supplied with the shim kit. This is only used to break apart the fuel pressure relief valve. We like to use a vise here in the ADS garage. So we're going to tighten the fuel pressure relief valve into the vise. Take an adjustable wrench, tighten that nut up to break apart the relief valve. You want to be careful when you break apart the relief valve because there is a spring in there. You don't want to lose any of the small parts. Once we have it apart, just you can discard that nut. We're going to take the spring out like so. And we're just going to drop in these 3 shims that's supplied in the kit. Once you have the shims in place, put the spring back in. Put this back together like so, and then we're just going to press it together in the vise. There you have it. Okay, now we have the shim kit installed in the fuel pressure relief valve. We need to tighten it back down. What we use here at the ADS garage, we have a 6-point wrench. It's 18 millimeter. It's very important to tighten this down just as tight as it was when you loosened it. It can be very difficult, but with a little patience, you can get it done. We like to link 2 wrenches together like this, and then just bear down on it as much as you can and torque it down. Okay, now the shim kit is torqued down. We're going to go ahead and put the air horn back on, run the bolts back down, tighten them, and then we're going to install the EGR tube. Okay, now we have our air horn is back installed. EGR tube is installed. We've reinstalled the dipstick and the decorative cover. Next step is going to be to start it. Just a couple of little tidbits here. When you do start it, we did relieve all the fuel pressure in the common rail, so you may have to crank it a couple times before it will fire. You just have to build the fuel pressure back up. Also on this engine, the transmission's a learning transmission. The engine and transmission have to relearn itself, so after about 50 miles of driving or so, you'll notice that the transmission will start to shift firmer and just work great together. La-ti-da-ti-da. Oops. Okay, now we have everything reinstalled. We've installed the dipstick, the decorative cover, the EGR tube is fastened back in place, and so is the air horn. Just a couple things to remember here. We did take the fuel pressure relief valve out. When we did that, we relieved all the fuel pressure in the common rail. So when you first start your engine, you may have to crank on it for a little bit. It just has to build the fuel pressure back up in the common rail, and then it will start. Also keep in mind that your engine and transmission is a learning transmission. Since we're adding 90% horsepower to it, the transmission has to learn how to deal with that extra horsepower. So after about an hour or two of driving, or 50 miles or so, everything will learn itself and you won't have any problems. If you need any technical support, just please feel free to give us a call. Thanks for joining us here at the ADS Garage. We hope you enjoy your next level diesel performance module.